Welcome back to our crime chat on fingerprinting. We're going to take a walk through a scene, and I'll point out some areas where there might be fingerprints and different ways in which you might approach getting fingerprints off of those items. So let's just take a walk through and take a look at a few items that we have. Over here we have a table that has been marked with some items of evidence, and there are obvious things here which we could possibly get fingerprints from. The most obvious things, of course, are the wine bottles. Now we take a look at the wine bottles and we notice we have a dark glass, and so we're looking for a fingerprint that's going to allow us to get better contrast. So choices here are many. One of the first choices would be a white dusting powder. White dusting powders are not the best choices because they're not as sensitive as some of the other dusting powders. So we probably might want to think along the lines of perhaps a dual powder or an aluminum flake powder. This is glass. Aluminum flake powder works best on glass, and so that would give us a fingerprint that has a silver cast. So that would be a good choice. We also have the label here. Now the label is going to be different because it's going to be a porous surface. So we need to think carefully about how we're going to approach that. One way to do that, after we've dusted it with aluminum flake powder, would be to maybe do some chemistry on that to see if we could raise the fingerprint using some sort of a chemical means. And specifically, since these are dark surfaces, we might want to use DFO or 1,2-indane-dione, and then look at the results of the fluorescent resulting fingerprint using an alternate light source. So those are just approaches that you might take. There could be others as well. We could use a magnetic fluorescence powder on the wine bottle, and that would give us a fluorescent fingerprint as well. So there are different choices you could use, but the most important thing is to make sure you get the appropriate contrast. We also have glasses of, well, in this particular case, blood in a wine glass, because that's the sequence, that's the premise of this particular scene. But this is a plain glass surface, and we would probably just be using a normal dusting powder to dust. Black powder, for example, would work. And we could also use a magnetic powder, which might even be a better choice. We could also do super gluing, and we could also super glue the wine bottle as well. And so then once we super glue it, then we would enhance the super glue using a dusting powder, such as a black powder, or we could even use a stain such as rhodamine 6G or some other of these stains. As we move through the scene, we notice a number of other surfaces that might contain fingerprints. We have a sink here, which of course you might expect that someone has been doing something. We have dishes in the sink, and we also have a pan here that's been marked with evidence. I choose something that's going to give us more contrast. Perhaps the best way to do this handle so you can get the entire surface at the same time would be to use super glue fuming, which would give us an off-white fingerprint color, and which would allow us to then either dust it or to take a photograph of it first and then dust it, or use a fluorescent stain. The metallic surface and the surface that we have for the sink base itself are both two different kinds of surfaces. The metallic surface, you would probably want to use a dusting powder on something like this surface. It's certainly too big to move to do super glue fuming, although there are wands that you can use where you could hold the wand and move it over the surface to get us a print, but that's probably not the best of choices. One of choice that might work very well on a sink like this, since it's a non-porous surface, might be something that uses europium or lanthanide chemistry. So you could just spray the surface to enhance the fingerprint, and then you wash it down with water and you would get a fluorescent fingerprint. So that would be a nice choice for something like this. And that way you don't have to worry about the powders. You have the sink where you can wash the rest of the fingerprint spray away. The surface itself here is probably going to be amenable to dusting powder. Now it's a mottled surface. It has a bunch of different colors in it. You might want to try a fluorescent powder. And since it's a horizontal surface, a magnetic powder would be the best choice. Perhaps a choice might be a magnetic dual fluorescent powder, or a magnetic black fluorescent powder, or a powder that contains a number of different kinds of powders in with it. Might be one like Print Glow, which will show up black or gray if it's a visible print, but if it's a very weak print, then you can use the alternate light source to get your fluorescence and identify the print. So we'll move further on into the scene and take a look over here where we have some vertical surfaces. Now here's where we have a door jamb, a vertical surface which has been painted, and so we are concerned with whether or not there might be fingerprints on the door jamb. So if one of the best ways to do the vertical surfaces with plain dusting powder, you don't know what kind of a surface it is, so you're probably not going to use a fluorescent dye because you're concerned that the dye is going to be absorbed by the surface and give fluorescence, and if that happens, then you're not going to be able to tell the difference between the surface and the fingerprint. So I'm going to use a black powder, and we're just going to choose an area that we hope is going to give us some fingerprint information. You see there's something starting to develop here now. Whether we have ridge detail or not, we'll know in a couple minutes. But there's certainly something developing. The prints are there. The ridge detail is going to be hard to ferret out because the way it looks appears like it was smudged. Although there is some ridge detail in this print here, but you're certainly able to see the print, and you want to make sure that the powder is moved around. You don't want to be brushing directly onto the print. You want to be kind of just over, barely touching it, if touching it at all. Just let the powder fall down onto the print. So here we have what looks like a handprint. And we have a little bit of ridge detail here, probably not enough to make a match. We have some ridge detail. We can see the actual print detail on this one. And so it looks like we have enough of the ridge detail on this part of the fingerprint to make an identification if we can lift it. So again, this is a white vertical surface, black